Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the next episode of Mint Mob. Jason here with my buddy Alex across the pond over in Germany. We're about to dive into the markets and see what's going on in the world of crypto, NFTs, Web3, traditional markets, you name it. We're going to dive into it. So, Alex, how's things out your way, man? How are you doing?
I'm actually looking at the charts all day long, trying to see if the 60K support holds or not. And yeah, it's actually a lot of red in the markets for the past days. Nothing too surprising, to be honest. Um, we still advise people to hold on their bags. And yeah, what about you? Have you sold everything already?
Well, you know me, man. I'm not selling anything. I'm in full on acquisition mode. I was buying all this past week, $50 here, $100 there, mainly Bitcoin and Solana. And this morning when I was checking the charts, I saw that the market had pulled back even more. So it was down to 60 on Bitcoin. Bitcoin had dropped to 60. Solana was down in the 120s. And so I see this as a fantastic entry, a good opportunity. And when I was doing a little bit of research on the markets, basically what it looks like is we've had a response to the Fed's interest rate policy, and we've had about $600 million worth of outflows from exchange traded products. So all your ETFs and that sort of thing in the various markets, which, it's a significant amount of money, but not enough to really depress the market when you think about the fact that Bitcoin, for example, is a $1.45 trillion market cap, depending on what the price is on that particular day. And I think MicroStrategy picked up another, what was it, $900 million last week worth of Bitcoin. So they almost offset what was being pulled out of the exchange traded product market. But the interesting thing about all this is, if you've been on the podcast or if you've been on the spaces with us, which by the way happen every Friday at 10 a.m. Arizona time, I'm not sure what that is in UTC. What is that, 5 p.m. UTC? Friday, 5 p.m. UTC on the Goodfellas timeline. If you ever want to drop in and chat live. And one of the things you'll hear me harp on a lot is just, you can't lose your mind when things look bad. Because when things look bad, this is when you have the greatest amount of opportunity. So when things are down, when things are moving sideways, when the accumulation phase is happening, when there's a supply shock, when there's some sort of negative news and the price pulls back, you got to buy. You got to make yourself buy if you believe in the story. And Alex and I were talking about a little bit of this off mic earlier. Maybe he'll share the story. But what I see is volatility is generally considered a negative thing. But the truth is volatility is your best friend if you're paying attention. If you're an active buyer or an active seller, volatility is your best friend. And you want markets that move, not markets that just sit there, and move, a couple percentage points every year. So this is an opportunity, and I would advise anyone who is basically paying attention and understands what they're doing to start accumulating high quality assets. And, just to kind of piggyback on that, even though we had outflows from exchange traded products, we had inflows into altcoins. We had 3 million flow into Solana, for example. So Solana could have gone lower, but there was $3 million worth of support keeping it where it was, which tells you that there are a lot of other investors who see value at this price point, and which is why I think that we're near the bottom, unless we get some really crazy negative news or something stupid happens, which is always possible. Assuming things kind of move along the way that they've been moving along, I think Solana is nearing a bottom at around that 125, 120 area USD. Bitcoin might get into the high 50s, and I kind of hope it does because I'd like to pick up some more at those discounted rates. But ultimately, assuming history and charts hold, we're looking at about 9 months, maybe a little bit less before we have the big run up, and you definitely want to be ahead of that. So I think it's good news if you understand how markets work, and bad news if you get sucked into the psychology of, oh shit, I'm scared, I got to sell.
Yeah, it's actually funny because besides all that, bad market sentiment, and by bad market sentiment, I mean what's being posted on Twitter. I when I checked the charts today for the first time, it was like probably 7 to 8 hours ago. I somehow pressed on the yearly chart, and then I looked at it, and I was like, that's not that bad actually. Coming from 60K, being at 16 to 60. Um, people always see like, hey, we've been at like 72 and now we're down to 60, and it's like almost like a 20% decrease, but in the end we are still very good. Altcoins is a little different story. We've talked about that as well. Altcoins tend to go down almost like 60, 70, 80%. But still, it's still a good chance to buy now, to accumulate whatever you have. And yeah, I feel like in like 6 months from now we are seeing totally different numbers, and most of the market participants will be happy, right?
That's the idea, right? I mean, that's what we're hoping holds true. Obviously, when we're dealing with speculative assets, you never know what direction they're going to go or on what time frame. But yeah, if charts and history holds true, then that's exactly what we're looking at, and I think everyone will be very happy. Assuming, again, it's a big if, assuming everything holds true. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Unfortunately, we live in a world where psychology rules the human animal, and we still are very slow learners when it comes to these things quite often. And so what I would just encourage is, like, on these days when it's bad and you wake up, and Alex and I were talking about this too as well off microphone, like the emotionalism that comes from seeing your portfolio down, or the emotionalism that comes from seeing your portfolio up. Like, you're happy when it's up and maybe you're sad when it's down. You got to learn how to reframe those things so that as long as the story is true, you buy those discounts. And what we find is that in most cases, when fear grips the market, or money is tight, or people are scared that they're going to lose what they have left, they end up selling when the market's down. So you have this cycle of people, usually inexperienced investors or people who haven't really put the time in. They'll buy high and then sell low, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do if you're trying to get on the gain train with whatever it is that you're buying. So you really have to guard your psychology and be careful not to fall prey to that, because the minute you sell, chances are, the thing's going to recover in the very near future. And again, like, if assuming history holds, which, none of us has a crystal ball, but assuming history holds, these are good entry points based on what we know. And again, based on what we know, we have adoption continuing to progress, either Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, especially the big ones. And as adoption continues to spread and expand, and more people, around the world with cell phones realize that they don't need a bank to transact, that they can literally just transact on their cell phones without having to deal with the middleman, it's just a good idea whose time has come, and I don't see any stopping that. So yeah, it's these entry points, I think, are gifts in a lot of ways. And I'm definitely putting my money where my mouth is. I've been buying basically since the last peak. I've been buying it all the way down. So that's kind of my opinion on the whole thing. And, I hope people take the time to do their research. I would highly recommend you visit hope.com if you're interested in Bitcoin, because Saylor's done a good job of putting a lot of educational materials up there. And, I'm not telling you what to do with your money, because obviously I don't know you and I don't know your personal goals. But you do need to understand crypto at the very least, so that you can make informed decisions as the market continues to expand. And this is true of all age groups. So, like Gen X, which is the generation I run in, a lot of these guys are starting to open their eyes to the possibilities of crypto, that, they see their wealth being devalued via inflation. A lot of younger people are seeing inflation in the marketplace in terms of, like, the cost of food and gas inputs. And then when you're working for small dollars, or, you're working by the hour, a lot of times you don't make enough to keep pace, and it affects your lifestyle. So I'm finding that not even a lot of younger people understand what's happening in the crypto market or with money. And so there's a tremendous education gap there that I think, Alex and I can sometimes help bridge. And hopefully we can, start getting some more of this information up on our primary website and bringing people in and educating them. But the truth is, very few people still own crypto. Like, a very tiny percentage of the world's population still owns crypto, or understands it, or has any affinity toward it. And so you're still early, no matter what the price is, assuming adoption continues. And, if I'm looking at what I want to do with my money, as long as adoption continues, as long as that story stays strong, the best place that you could possibly put it, in my opinion, is in the crypto market and high quality assets.
Yeah, I totally agree. But we always say, like, if history repeats and everything, we know what happened in the past cycles. We know what to expect. History holds so far, so it's actually like until now nothing happened that is like surprising. But what do you think could actually cause a black swan event? I mean, imagine, for example, I know we all looking forward to the vote like later this year. Do you think if Biden stays president, it would cause crypto to go down?
I think Biden is a disaster on a million different levels. Not only, and the truth is, one of my mentors said to me one time, he says, people get the government they deserve. And I thought about that for a long time. And then I realized he's absolutely right. Like, people get the government they deserve. So if you look around the world and you see chaos and corruption, this is what the people have decided they're willing to accept, right? When I look at the Biden presidency, I see a man with dementia who's obviously mentally impaired, who is not making decisions, who's being led around by an invisible, dog leash, basically. I see a non-existent vice president who likes to cackle at everything, who likes to, spit word salad at microphones and make no sense. And so, like the Biden presidency is not good for crypto in a lot of ways, but it's not good for people in a lot of ways too. Obviously you've got Democrats like Elizabeth Warren who, she's got a hard on for getting rid of Bitcoin and crypto in general, basically calling it a scam and calling it a money laundering system. She's put forth legislation to stop it and to end it. And of course, you haven't really had Biden come out and say anything against that. The only candidate saying anything against, this sort of negative opinion coming from government on crypto are Donald Trump and Kennedy, and I think Vivek as well, Ramaswamy, but he's already withdrawn from the race. So when you look at your options out there, there are some decent options, at least in terms of lifestyle and crypto. But I think, it's going to come down to really how people perceive their lives and how they indoctrinate themselves sitting in front of the nightly news. Because honestly, the job of the news is to make everyone's problem your problem. Back in the day, when I was just a little baby, there was a TV in the house with no remote control and 3 channels basically. And, I was the remote control as soon as I was old enough to walk. My dad would tell me to get up and go change the channel. And, when that was the case, like, news was local. There were things that were being reported primarily in your local market, like, hey, this is happening in your town. These are issues that you need to be aware of. These are things that you can control and impact because they're just down the street. And then, of course, you'd get some world news or some national news, but no one ever considered, world news or national news something that they needed to onboard every single day and worry about and be fearful of, because they knew it was out of their control. But what cable news did is it made everyone's problem your problem. So right now, if I flip on my television, and I see, oh, there's this crazy thing happening in Europe, or this insane thing happening in Australia, or this crazy thing happening in Asia, now all of a sudden I've got the news telling me that I should worry about this for the next 20 hours straight, and nobody's really saying, hey, I know you're in Phoenix. Why don't you go pay attention to what's happening in Phoenix? You could go impact change and make change there, but the nightly news's job is to make the world's problems your problem, which you have no control over in most cases. And it distracts you because at the end of the day, on the things that you could impact and could control, you spend more time worrying about these bigger issues than actually taking action on the things that locally you could impact. And it just makes people feel, useless and impactless and powerless and scared and worried. And so when I look at like my parents' generation, like, they'll sit in front of the television and watch, the news all day long, and then they will never leave the house. Everything is scary to them. Like, my mom won't even get on a plane, right? And so when I think about these things and how people are programmed by this information or misinformation in most cases, it's just ridiculous. So I don't see, I don't see any of that changing until people decide to change what's happening in their own homes, what's happening in their own hearts and minds. There's a great quote. Who was it? P.J. O'Rourke, who was a satirist. He died a few years ago, but there's this great quote that I've posted many, many times, and he basically just says, everybody wants to save the world, but nobody wants to help mom do the dishes. And that's the fucking problem. Like when it comes to all this worry about this person and that person and, who's going to be elected and this and that and the other thing, it's like, you know what, take care of what's happening in your own house and then walk outside your front door and take care of what's happening by your front door and then take care of what's happening in your community and then your little town or whatever, instead of worrying about all these things happening across the world that you can't have any impact on whatsoever other than making some, virtue signaling post on social media, which does nothing for anything.
Yeah, I feel like whenever I check media, it's flooded with bad news. It's like as if people want us to read bad news all day long. As if it's about like people killing each other. It's in Europe there is that big discussion about migrants who came to the country from like third world countries, usually a lot of Arabic countries coming in here, having a different mentality, a different culture, and behaving bad. There's a lot of group rapings going on here and a lot of terrible stuff. And when you go to you go and read newspapers or some news sites, and you always get confronted with bad news, that definitely does something to you. And I'm not sure if it's just about the clicks, that gets like some kind of attention, and they do not want to spread good news because that doesn't get as much as attention. But it's definitely a bad thing, and that's why people around here try to somehow escape the media by just avoiding to read and watch everything.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you see that a lot. People. I mean, who wants to be a part of this negativity, right? At the end of the day, like nobody really wants to live that life. And the people who engage in that stuff, and experience that negativity, whether it's in the crypto news world or the migrant news world or the political news world, like at the end of the day, you have to decide what your value system is, and you have to decide what you want to do with your life, because your life is very, very short and it could end at any moment. And anytime you have a source of contention or some source that's stealing your peace, it's the price is too high. You need to just do something else, with your time. And so when it comes to, the presidency here, I have no control over the outcome. I have no control over the outcome whatsoever. And, a lot of people feel like they had no control over the outcome the last time there was an election. There was a lot of funny things going on. And even though there's no proof, no one could prove that there was any tampering, that doesn't mean there wasn't any tampering. It just means that it couldn't be proved, right? And so there's a lot of suspicion here around, well, should I even bother to vote if my vote's not going to be counted? Like, who cares? So, at the end of the day, you have to look at your value system and what you want to create, and you have to work toward that. And then anytime you have left over outside of family and working toward your vision, okay, sure, go invest in finding out what's going on, be well-informed. Don't cast a vote if you're not well-informed, don't waste your time just voting along a party line because you've always voted for a particular party, because you get bad things. And, this is happening not only in the US, but I've seen it happen in Canada, where my wife is from, with Trudeau. I've seen it happening in Europe. I've seen the headlines come across the wire. But the truth is, the only thing that I can wake up and control is me. And so today, what am I going to do? I have a podcast with Alex. I've got to work out, take care of my body. I've got to eat well. I've got to work toward creating the vision that I want to make real. And, what happens with Joe Biden and Donald Trump and JFK, whatever, it's going to happen. I have no control over that. All I can control is me, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And I'm going to try to be the best version of me that I possibly can, so that I can influence other people to do the same thing. And it's only when people realize that at the end of the day, that they are responsible for the way that they show up in the world, no matter what, hand you were dealt. You're always responsible for doing something with that hand that you got dealt. Until people get out of this mindset that government's going to save them, that government's going to help me, that government's going to make my life better. Until that mindset goes away, nothing changes, whether you vote, for this party or that party. Because at the end of the day, all they're doing is pandering for votes. And in most cases, they just buy your vote by promising you free shit. And that's not what politics is supposed to be. So, at the end of the day, I look at all this stuff and it's a heavy thing, but I see a lot of people fleeing these systems using crypto, like fleeing these systems using NFT technology. I see way out, because the only way that you stop a government that's out of control is you starve it of funds. And so, if you think about like what's happening in Miami, for example, Miami has, I believe it's called Miami Coin. And the idea behind that, like, think about, you're part of a city, you're part of a state, whatever, a province, where depending on wherever you live. And that city and state and province is extracting funds from you at the point of a gun. They're taking tax money from you, and they're threatening your life, or they're threatening your freedom if you don't pay them. Okay. Well, if you can't avoid paying them, and they don't have to provide value, like based on their performance, then they can always keep power. They'll always keep power over you, because they will always pay themselves out of your paycheck. How very nice of them, right? But if you have something that they can't confiscate, and you can then vote for services that you use and not vote for services that you don't use by using a token or a coin or some crypto technology that says, this is a service I value, therefore I'm going to buy this service. Now all of a sudden you're at a spot where government can sort of serve you by actually having to provide value. Because if the thing that they want you to pay for, no one wants to pay for, and they can't force you to pay for it, then that thing goes away. So I think crypto, Web3, NFTs, all of these things combined, are a way out of these governments that have basically just overrun their populations and their constituents with, too much regulation, heavy taxes, and a piss poor delivery of services. And until that changes, nothing in government changes, because again, they can force you to pay them. They're the only organization on the planet that can force you to pay them. They've got all the guns, they've got all the money, they can print as much money as they want. And as long as they can fund their bullshit, wars and agendas and policies, as long as they can fund themselves and pay themselves, then you get what you got. So until we can starve them of that, and crypto is one way of doing that, then nothing changes.
But isn't it some kind of contradiction if you say, like, whatever you vote for, you're not going to change anything, and on the other hand, you say people get what they deserve, like politician wise?
Is it a contradiction? I don't think so. I think it's a values problem. Like you mentioned migrants. Like the problem with the migration piece isn't that people are migrating. The problem is there's a clash of values. So, liberal European values or liberal Western democracy values are not necessarily honored by people who've never experienced those values. And so you have a clash of values, and we call it a clash of cultures, right? And it's the same thing with politics. You have one side voting for a set of values, and you have another side voting for a different set of values. And if you say, okay, well, people get the government that they deserve, what we're saying is that on some level, people are responsible for allowing themselves to be indoctrinated, right? So like if my favorite candidate, whoever that candidate happens to be, is promising free shit to my people, or they're promising this particular right and privilege to this group of people that I love and adore, but not this other group of people that I don't particularly care for, then what I'm doing is I'm falling prey to their indoctrination. And on some level, I'm responsible for understanding the philosophy of that, right? Politics was never about, slinging mud or like yelling at your opponent or insulting them. It was about philosophies. Like, what is the philosophy that's going to advance our culture and our people, right? Crypto is a philosophy. It's based on a philosophy of freedom, of autonomy, right? And that philosophy flies in the face of government control. It's a different value system. And so if we indoctrinate people to believe, and people allow themselves to then believe that government is supposed to take care of them and that government is always the good guy and that government should have all the guns and all the power and be able to tax you, whatever they want to tax you, then people vote in that way and they get the government that they deserve. And then what happens is it gets to be too much and then they start voting the other way, right? So then the pendulum starts swinging the other way. So I think what my mentor was saying when he said that government, people get the government they deserve, is it's based on like the amount of thought and education they put into what they're doing with their votes. And most people simply don't think. There's bills to pay, there's families to raise, there's distractions, there's fatigue, there's all these things going on, and they simply can't sit down and read a philosophy book or read a book on capitalism versus communism versus socialism and understand what those things mean. They're just voting based on sound bites, right? I think that's kind of what he means, and I'm not sure that that's a contradiction. I think it's just a values clash, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. I just felt like, from the past votings that you guys had, it always felt like, you could choose between like the worst case and the other case was a little less worse. And the question always was like, how can people solve that? Like, do you need like some kind of civil war in there to get like to bring the whole government down, or like because you want peace as well, and that's what I felt was like some kind of contradiction.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are people very smart people who are predicting that there's a high probability of some form of civil war. I don't know what that would look like. There was a movie just released about a U.S. Civil War, and in different states drawing the lines. I mean, it's really interesting to sort of listen to the different opinions. I mean, I feel like when I look at the world as a whole, like if you give me a rational person, someone who isn't completely indoctrinated and just like closed-minded, if you give me a rational person and I sit down across from them and let's say they vote for candidate X, or I want to vote for candidate Y, and so we have a different value system, 9 times out of 10, when we start discussing in a rational way what we really want to create, we want the same things. It's just like, how do we go about creating them is the question, right? That's where we differ. So I feel like most people are basically the same. Most people want the same things. They want to be successful. They want their families to do well. They want opportunities for themselves and their friends. They want to be able to live in a decent house and have a good community, and they want to continue to learn and grow as individuals. They want some level of autonomy, and some level of freedom, some level of responsibility, and some level of security. And it's the mixture of all those things that people argue about. It's like, how do we get to those things? Well, you don't get to any of those things by creating dependency and by creating like a government that's basically buying votes. Like, that's not how you get it. And that's what we've had now for a good, 20 years, 30 years. It's been forever. And, when I say like a liberal democracy, what I'm referring to is classic liberalism, which is basically libertarianism, which is like freedom. There's freedom and there's personal responsibility and there's you giving yourself or your friends an opportunity, and yourself or your friends, you succeed or you fail, but you don't run around blaming other people and expect a handout because you made a bad decision. That's not liberal. That's socialism. That's a different thing altogether. And so we've sort of corrupted or co-opted the word liberal to mean Democrat, and conservative means Republican. But the truth is, the balance is in the middle. Like, you need both. You need people who want to honor tradition and understand how things work, and you also need people who are willing to push the envelope and try new things and be willing to fail. And that push-pull is what works. But what we're finding right now is, like, if you look at the election results in the U.S., it's just a small, tiny little fraction of people in the middle who move the election one way or the other. And so this idea of civil war is coming from the fact that you've got one faction. Let's say, the Democrats get 40% of the votes or 45% of the votes, and then the Republicans get 45% of votes. And then there's like 10% left over who are undecided or in the middle who decide the election. But the 45 on either side are not changing their minds no matter what. That's not what you want. You want people talking. You want people, exchanging ideas. You want people understanding incentives. You want people to interact with one another. You don't want to have 10% of the population who's capable of critical thought saying, well, I'm voting for this person because their philosophies are conducive to creating a good world, and 90% of the people saying, well, this person is on my team and this person is on your team, so I'm voting for this person. That's not thinking, and so like these quote unquote democracies, like people have this idea that democracy is the answer. And, in most cases it's not, because what happens is you get an uneducated populace. And this is why there's been a resurgence in interest in things like monarchies. So like if I look at democracies and I go on the street and I talk to the average person, and the average person can't even tell me who the president is right now, or who the vice president is, or what the Civil War was, or, anything about, civil rights, or they can't speak anything to any of those topics, but that person gets a vote. That person gets the same vote as someone who's educated gets. And so when you look at that, the democracy is not the answer. It only helps to have a democracy if you have an educated group of people voting. And that's not what we have today. We have an indoctrinated group of people voting, which means that there's only a small percentage of people who aren't on either team who move the election one way or the other.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I feel like we got an impression of what people are capable of back then, in 2021, when we had that storming of the U.S. Congress after the voting. And from the perspective of a European guy, watching the U.S. vote is almost like some kind of watching a movie, because it's so interesting and exciting what's happening over there. But considering that we are talking about the biggest economy of the world, and like the country with the biggest, like, the military power and everything, it's actually ridiculous what's happening over there. So yeah, crazy. And I'm definitely curious to see what happens in November this time.
Yeah, man, you're absolutely right. It's a total clown show. And the fact that politics has been reduced to the clown show that it's been reduced to is not good. It's not. We need thinking people. We need rational people. We need a administration and a group of leaders who actually understand philosophy and human incentive. But, generally what happens is democracies outgrow themselves. We've seen this historically happen time and time again, and so basically what government does is it tries to distract the people with all kinds of, ridiculous nonsense, whether it's, the Romans and the gladiatorial games, or the U.S. who decides, oh, well, we need to go fight a war somewhere, get everybody on the same team. It's just ridiculous, distraction-oriented sort of nonsense. This person called that person a name, but nobody really cares about the underlying philosophies. And that's really where we need to get back to. So, I mean, I know we've gone down this, this massive tangent, but this is relative to what's happening in the crypto world. And it's been interesting to see, because if you look at people who understand Bitcoin or understand the purpose and the reasoning behind crypto in general, this sort of idea of freedom, this sort of idea of autonomy, which shows up as anonymity in this market. People don't want to be recognized. They don't want to be known. They don't want, Big Brother, if you will, like knowing their posts or who they are and this kind of thing. When you look at those values, these are classical liberal or libertarian values. Like, you want to be free, you want to make your decisions, you want to live with your results, and then you want to go on about your day. And you're not here to hurt somebody else or cause somebody else a problem. You're just here to do the best that you can with what you have, and then move on to the next day and do the best that you can with what you have. And unfortunately, the truth is, government is the only entity or organization that gets rewarded when it doesn't solve problems. It's like there's no vested interest in government ever solving a problem because they're already useless, basically. Like at the end of the day, it's governments that start wars. It's governments that commit the most heinous, violent acts. It's governments that print money. It's governments that steal your money. Like at the end of the day, they are the greatest, sort of liability on the planet. They've killed more people than any other organization. And that's always going to be true because they have all the power. So when you look at the idea behind crypto was basically one way of keeping all that in check, because now they can't take your money. They can't fund their bullshit. And if they can't take your money, they can't steal your money, then they can't make up all these stories for why they need to print money or why they need to spend money on something else. They actually have to start being a bit more responsible. And if you can imagine like a business that basically provided no value, but somehow was able to make money, that's what you would have in government. But it doesn't exist in the wild. There's no business that doesn't provide value and makes money. You have to provide value to make the money. Government is the complete opposite of that. So, I mean, when we look at that value system like crypto, man, if things get crazy here in the US and, I don't want to pay an exit tax to leave the country, well, I'm just going to convert all my assets to crypto and I'm going to walk across a border and I'm going to buy a new phone and I'm going to pull everything in, and I'm not paying their silly little tax to get out of the problems that they created, right? And so the same holds true for anyone in any country. And now that you have the ability to basically cross lines and take your wealth with you, it sort of raises an eyebrow for government because now they have a problem. They can no longer control you. And so if we have a world where crypto is that, it's sort of an escape hatch, if you will, then it changes the role of how all humans interact, not just governments, but how all humans interact. As with smart contracts thing being done or not, with real estate being tokenized, with real world assets being tokenized, and things being final, like if I send you money in a transaction and that transaction is final, then you know what? I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page on what we're transacting about, right? There's no do-overs, in the world of crypto. So it just causes everybody to be more responsible, more self-initiated, I guess you would say. And also that brings more self-actualization because you have to really think through and understand what it is that you're doing. Government is the complete opposite of that. It's the most irresponsible, violent, ridiculous organization in all countries on the planet. And it needs to be put in check. And the founding fathers here did a good job initially, but they didn't go far enough to keep government in check. So it's just continued to expand since its inception, and it's completely out of whack.
Yeah, but if you look at the United States, I feel like you definitely need a president that, whenever he shows up somewhere publicly, you shouldn't be worried about him, embarrassing himself again. And you have that all the time with Biden. Whenever he shows up, you basically get another meme of him after that. And I feel like you have the same with Trump as well, because the way he talks and everything. I feel like the last decent guy you had, like completely leaving out the politics, but just from like looking at the person and if he was like charismatic and everything, was probably Obama. But I think the politics he made were not that good as well, as far as I know.
Yeah, Obama, I think he is respected for being an orator, a good speaker. But the truth is his policies were horrendous, and he incepted a lot of the identity politics that we're dealing with today. If you look at the usage of different like words around racism or classism, it all came from that administration. The usage of those terms went through the roof. There was basically a class warfare created during his presidency. He passed Obamacare, which sent healthcare costs through the roof for the average family. The average person's paying more in healthcare than they do for their mortgage, which is absolutely ridiculous. And, this, of course, is another government program designed to help people, which only hurts people. And so, like, at the end of the day, when you look at all this stuff, no thinking person who understands philosophy, human incentive, who really understands that in order to get a particular thing, you have to incentivize that particular thing. No one who understands human incentive and human action would do any of these things that any of the presidents over the last 30, 40 years have done. You know, there's been bright spots here and there, but for the most part, it's been money printing, wars, more social programs, more social engineering, division, and here we are. And the truth is, like I said earlier, there's no incentive for governments to solve problems, because if they solved problems, you would see how useless they are. You wouldn't need them, right? So it's in every interest of the government to make sure that people are experiencing problems. That's their whole job, is to make sure you think you have a lot of problems. So if you had a government that made you responsible and could teach you how to solve your problems or get out of a bad situation, then hey, why do you need that government? You don't. You just need an educator who can do the same thing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So, what can we look at? I mean, do you think after the next election, let's just suggest, like, I don't know, Trump is getting the presidency, and do you feel like there is a chance that you get I mean, Biden is probably not going to participate in 8 years from now. Do you think there is a chance that? What do you think about, how is that guy from Miami called, DeSantis or something like that?
Yeah, DeSantis.
Do you think he's better?
I don't know that much about him, to be honest with you. And what I know of him, you know, I appreciate his history, you know, being a serviceman, being actually plugged into a community where his results matter and his results are measurable. You know, for me, like, if I'm basing my decision on results, I would consider someone like DeSantis, but, you know, I don't know if he's good, bad, or otherwise. I think, I mean, you know, not to be pessimistic, but the truth is, from where I'm sitting, I don't see a lot of ways out of the current situation for the U.S. And I feel like, and I hope that I'm wrong here, but I feel like conflict is the only way that this gets resolved. Either massive inflations that create so much money that people finally realize government is their enemy. They're not their friend. They're not there to help. Or some sort of internal conflict. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not saying there'll be a war, but there are people, predicting that there's a high probability of war. What I see is people who understand philosophy and who are rational, reasonable people. I see them going to states where they can create communities and live unmolested, unbothered by what's going on in the sort of the hotbeds of the world. Because the U.S. is a really interesting experiment. You know, it was the first time Enlightenment thinkers came together and designed a government from the ground up. And like I said, they did a lot of things right. They sacrificed a lot. Many of them lost lives and treasure and families and land and status. They gave up a lot, and they didn't have to give up a lot. And what I see happening right now is that generations today are basically just squandering that gift. And so if you look at the U.S., people like to say, well, California is a blue state, and, Texas is a red state, and, like Democrat, Republican. But the truth is, if you look at a county map, like, you can look at the states and how each popular vote in the state went. And California always, or at least for the last 20 or 30 years, has voted Democrat. New York generally goes to Democrats, blah, blah, blah. So, it's the same old, it's always the same thing. But the truth is, if you look at the county maps, like if you look at the counties inside those states, there's a very small percentage of blue voters, and they're all concentrated in cities, and they're all sort of in their little bubbles. And that's all that they do, is they just continue to vote for the same people and policies that have created negative situations for them. And so on some level, you have to wonder when these guys are going to wake up, right? And I don't see that happening anytime soon. So I see the only thing that's been saving the U.S. so far is the electoral vote system, meaning that the popular vote doesn't carry the presidency. It's it's the electoral vote on top of that. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. But if even in like wherever you are in the world, if you just pull up like a county voting map, you know, you'll see that there's tiny little specks of blue in all the major cities, which is basically where you have most of the problems. You have environmental issues, you have crime, you have a lot of these things happening, you know, a lot of unrest, homeless encampments, immigration problems, job issues. But this has always been the case in the cities because obviously you're concentrating a lot of people in one area. And so these people are looking for outside help. But then if you get outside of that into the rural areas where you have people who are more self-sufficient, they live off the land, or they grow crops, or they live in small communities, or they have small businesses, then these people always vote red because they have a more self-deterministic view of life. They're more responsible. They feel more responsible for their situation and their surroundings, and they protect that, right? So what I see happening is no matter who gets elected, I see more and more people who think along the lines of, I'm responsible, you know, I can do well if I play my cards right. You know, I know how to invest my money. I know how to buy real estate. I know how to build a business. I see more and more of these people creating communities of their own, which will naturally exclude people who think differently. So what that leads to, I'm not really sure, but I just see as more and more identity politics is played out, I see more and more people just sort of congregating with the people that they tend to identify with.
Yeah, I mean, all the problems you just described are actually, you know, valid for every Western country, especially in Europe as well. But let's see where we go there. It's definitely going to be interesting. But let's take also a little look onto the crypto markets again, and let's get back to funny stuff. Have you seen what 50 Cent did?
No, I haven't paid any attention.
So he actually, I'm not sure if it's legit, but he created a meme coin called G Unit, of course, and yeah, it pumped and dumped, went to zero, and while it rocked, 50 went to Instagram and said like, "Hey, my X account got compromised, and some I have no idea of crypto, and whoever did this made like 700K in a couple of minutes." And you
Jeez.
know, a lot of people claiming that it was actually him, and you know, trying to get away with it like that.
You know what? Now that you mentioned it, I did hear about this. I think it's just hilarious that people would even buy this crap to begin with. There's another headline where Jason Derulo has been sort of lambasted for his meme coin promotion and rug pull. I mean, there's no reason to buy any of these coins. I can't stress it enough. You know, if you're listening to my voice right now, don't buy these stupid fucking tokens. They're going to zero. And, you know, unless you're an informed trader, and then in which case basically your whole idea is to dump on someone else, which to me seems like a bad thing to do. So I wouldn't want to do that. I believe in win-win relationships. But, you know, for the average person, man, stay away from this crap. It's garbage. It's never going to be worth anything. And chances are you're going to get dumped on, and you're going to see 50 Cent not own what happened, or what happened with his account. Who knows, man? I don't know if it's real or not, but I would be really surprised if all these people suddenly their Twitter accounts have been hacked. And, you know, I think it's more like, you know, it's just garbage and they don't want to associate themselves with it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Jason Derulo and as well, and he's actually so deep in it. Like he's even posting videos promoting his coin and everything. I think some guy actually exposed him and was like, "Hey, you've been involved in so many rugs already," and he added some screenshots and everything. And as you mentioned, yeah, it's crazy. People should definitely stay away from it. And you know, even if you're lucky and you make a couple $1,000 on some kind of meme coin, you're going to lose it on the next one. So yeah, crazy times. But I felt like, you know, especially after Iggy Azalea and that Kardashian girl, you know, they were pretty big. I think they went down pretty big as well. And you feel like people should learn from it, but whenever some celebrity is posting something, people just jump into it again, and it's crazy. I think we had a pretty big thing with Andrew Tate as well. I think he created a coin and tried to pump it as much as possible. I think he even burned like a major amount of the tokens he created to artificially pump the token. And yeah, people are so crazy. I mean, it's a big casino, and people are so willing to take part in it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The funny thing about the meme coin thing is like when these people get on Twitter or X or whatever, and they start talking about long-term prospects for for their meme token and how their meme token is going to take over the world. I'm like, I just sit there in amazement. Like, I can't even fathom thinking like that because it's so obviously a ploy to steal from people. And the fact that people are being sucked into this thing, my heart goes out to these guys who get sucked into these things. But by the same token, like just like people get the government they deserve, you get the financial portfolio you deserve as well. So if you're buying a financial portfolio because some jackass that, for whatever reason has achieved some level of fame, then you're doing it wrong. I can't stress that enough. Like, you're doing it very, very wrong, and you need to stop right now while you're behind before you get really far behind, right? At the end of the day, like, there's no long-term prospects for any of these tokens. They are all going to zero. And, at best, 10 years from now, at best, you're going to have a massive consolidation, maybe longer, who knows. You have a massive consolidation of tradable coins, like the number of tradable coins will actually fall. And sure, you'll have tokens that exist for projects, like we'll have our token, another project will have their token, but they won't be meant to be used as money or as some sort of exchange of value. They'll be meant to be used in an ecosystem for a reason, which is fine. And I think that's, the original purpose is like, let's use this token inside our ecosystem. Cool. But I'm not going to consider, some random meme token to be the next Bitcoin. It's just not going to happen.
Is it actually that easy to I mean, could we actually just go ahead and make like AU tradable? I mean, like I always feel like, if you have some kind of investment asset that should be somehow regulated. I mean, it should be forbidden, right? Is it actually legal to do all that?
Well, I mean, the legality is dependent upon jurisdiction in a lot of ways, right? So it's hard to say if it's legal or not. It kind of depends on if you know where this organization is or this person is, and if their jurisdiction allows it. Technically in the US, it would not be allowed because you're selling a security of some sort, basically, to the public. And that means that, you have to go through all the, the steps and the levels and the hoops and the lawyers and all the rest of it. But when it's basically anonymous people in who knows where places doing these things, then of course jurisdiction becomes, all right, well, what jurisdiction am I in? Do I even know? Do I know who's created this, token? Is there any recourse? And then, of course, to get listed on reputable exchanges, there are some hoops to jump through. But obviously, they're not that big of hoops, or you wouldn't see this many meme coins coming online so quickly and, pumping and dumping like that, right? So, I mean, I think the proof is just in the results. And right now, like if you wanted to create a meme coin on Solana, it literally takes, just a few keystrokes and you can create a token on Solana, no big deal. And Bitcoin the same way now with runes. And I'm not sure how Ethereum works. I've never played with their tech, but I'm sure it's not that much more difficult there either. So, I mean, it's easy to create. And if you have a couple relationships built with quality people, even though they're anonymous, maybe they list your token, maybe they don't. But yeah, the barrier to entry seems to be pretty much like network marketing level. It seems to be pretty low.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know that it's forbidden in Germany for sure. Even though I know a German guy who recently made a pre-sale and and dropped the coin. I know you know him as well. And it's funny because people feel like there are no laws in crypto, and it's crazy. I recently saw another token. I think it was called like, how was it called? Water token, and it raised like 40 million in a couple of minutes in its pre-sale. And yeah, it's still going crazy. But I hope, as you just mentioned, we will see a big consolidation on crypto coins, and I hope that meme coins will not be part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it has to happen. I mean, there's just too many. There's more supply than there is demand for the tokens, obviously, which is why, and we talked about this earlier as well. We actually did a podcast before we started recording the podcast, which we'll have to get back to that podcast because this podcast has been more about politics than anything. But now that we are talking about crypto, like, you see the same money chasing ever expanding numbers of goods, right? So when that happens, the same money chasing an ever expanding number of goods, then the only option is for consolidation because there's just not enough money in the marketplace. Now, in the future, that may not be true. 5 years from now, 3 years from now, who knows, 2 years from now, we might have just an influx of users in the Web3, NFT, token market, whatever. But right now, that hasn't been the case. And I'm sure you've seen this if you've gone from server to server in all of the different rugs that everybody has had, the joy of participating in. You see the same people kind of pop in and out. And they just go from server to server thinking that they're going to make $1 million because this NFT project or that token promised the sun, moon, and stars. But, meanwhile, there was actually no plan to do anything or build anything. It was just a bunch of bullshit. So, yeah, I mean, that has to be the case. Like, these are the incentives. Again, show me the incentives. I'll show you the outcomes. The incentive is throw some shit at the wall, see if it sticks, pick up your money, walk away. Don't care about the people. That's the incentive. So the fact that we're doing it differently means that we're actually flying in the face of that and we're operating from values. And unless you're the type of person who's going to take the time to actually get to know the people that you're, partnering with in a lot of ways and learn their value system, you're going to get fucked left and right. So yeah, it has to consolidate, or we have to have a shit ton more money flow into all of these areas of the market.
Yeah, I've actually just seen a statistics of of how many NFTs are being minted, collections are being minted per day, and I think when we had the big NFT bull run back then, it wasn't even as high as it's been like in January 2023, I guess, and yeah, it's still like several thousands of collections being minted every day, and you just mentioned that there's not enough money for every collection to go to the moon. So it's actually also pretty obvious that most of these collections are just some pump and dump shit. Try to get some attention, like allocate half of the NFTs to yourself, and then just dump them on the buyers. And yeah, just keeps going like that. People still fall for it, and it's probably going to stay like that for a pretty long time. But yeah, let's maybe jump a little bit into the Goodfellas as well. I've seen we are already at 1 hour in. It's funny because we've been arguing about, hey, what can we talk about today, and we always manage to talk for hours. Yeah, so Goodfellas, we just recently released an opt-in form for people, and yeah, maybe you want to drop some words on that.
Sure, yeah. Just real quick. I mean, we talked a little bit about it on Spaces, but we're not for sale. Basically, is what it comes down to. Like, our value system is not for sale. We have these people pop into Discord, and you see them. Hey, check this ticket. Check that ticket. Yeah, I'm not interested in your hype and horseshit. Like, go away, right? So, what we're doing is we're looking for alternative marketing techniques, and one of the things that we want to do is find the collectors in the marketplace, and so. We've set up some opt-in forms so that when we work with artists or we drop a collection, that we can have a campaign go out and look for, that's actively looking for NFT collectors and holders. Because, right now the NFT market is in a consolidation. You're seeing lots of projects fall by the wayside, and you're seeing volumes go down. And this is normal when you have more supply again than demand. And so what we want to make sure that we do is carefully guard against who comes into the community. And the way that we do that is that we gate that opportunity, and then we give mint passes to very specific people. So that's what that's all about. And what we'll end up doing is having different opt-in forms for different drops and different artists. And we'll make sure that the people who want to mint are the ones who get the mint passes. We're not trying to incentivize you to run out on X or interact on Discord and give you some free shit. We already have seen the detrimental impact of that. What we're trying to do is find people who actually care about what it is that we're doing and partner closely with them so we can continue to build. And I feel like what we're going into is almost like an NFT winter, really. And the people who come out the other side of this NFT winter are going to be the ones who really do really well, because the technology will be matured, the use cases will be there, there'll be more education in the marketplace, there'll be more informed buyers, and the degens will basically fall by the wayside and or go into another market. So that's kind of what's up with the forums and kind of where we see that going. So like if you're listening to this and you understand, that we're a value-based project and that we're doing our best to put forth good things, starting with quality artwork and IP rights and making sure that you own what you buy, then drop by Discord and we'll drop a link. Actually, we'll get the link into the trusted links section of Discord so that you can actually opt in for one of those mint passes. But we definitely want to make sure that if you're interested and you are an actual collector, that you are invited in and you have access to the next mint.
Yeah, definitely. So we are looking forward to get in touch with the good guys, with the ones who are actually interested in minting great art and IP. And yeah, I think this should be it for today. Do we like miss any like topics?
Well, I'm sure we missed a lot of topics, but we don't have time to go into them all today, my friend. So yeah, why don't we end it here? I think we basically ran the gamut from politics to crypto to NFTs to market fluctuations to investor psychology, quite a bit of stuff. So why don't we end it here, and we'll pick it up again on the Spaces Friday. So if you guys are out there listening to the podcast, be sure and jump on Goodfellas NFT on X. Follow us there, jump in Discord, and drop by Spaces on Friday at 5 p.m. UTC, which is 10 a.m. Arizona time, and we'll catch up and it'd be great to get to know you.
Exactly, man. So thank you everyone for listening again. Hope to see you guys on Spaces on Friday, 5 p.m. UTC as usual. And yeah, we should be able to announce a mint date by then for the next drop. So yeah, looking forward to see you guys. And until then, bye bye.